Young millionaire is forced to marry a fat, poor woman and is shocked when the morning sun reflected off the ocean waves as Ethan Blackwood opened his eyes in his beachfront mansion in Newport Beach. Today was his 22nd birthday, and as usual, everything was perfect. At least, that's what everyone around him believed. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," said Maria, one of the many staff members whose names he barely remembered. "Your breakfast is ready on the terrace." Ethan nodded without really looking at her. With his perfectly styled blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and athletic build, he looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. Which, in fact, he often did. As he sipped his coffee on the terrace overlooking the Pacific, Ethan scrolled through dozens of birthday messages on his phone. None of them felt sincere. Just people wanting to stay connected to the Blackwood fortune. His father, Harold Blackwood, hadn't even called. Just sent a text, "Happy birthday. The new Porsche is in your garage. Keys with security." That was Harold, believing everything could be fixed with money. Since Ethan's mother Elizabeth died when he was just 5, gifts had replaced affection in the Blackwood household. Later that evening, Ethan's mansion transformed into the party venue of the year. Celebrities, influencers, and Newport Beach's elite filled every corner. Victoria Sanders, his model girlfriend, clung to his arm, her perfect smile never reaching her eyes. "Babe, when are you going to propose properly?" Victoria whispered, eyeing the diamond tennis bracelet he'd given her. "I mean, we've talked about it, and I've already started looking at venues." Ethan knew what she really meant. When would she get legal access to the Blackwood billions? "Let's talk about it tomorrow," he said, downing another glass of champagne. As the party reached its peak, Ethan snuck away to his study. Among the expensive art and antiques, only one item held any real value to him, a small photograph of his mother. Unlike the sophisticated socialites filling his home, Elizabeth looked genuine in the picture, her smile warm and real. "She would have been disappointed," came a soft voice from the doorway. Martha Sullivan, the elderly housekeeper who had been with the family for decades, stood watching him. "In the party?" Ethan asked. "In what you've become," Martha said gently. She was the only person who spoke to him like a human being, not a bank account. "Your mother believed people were worth more than possessions." Martha was the closest thing to family Ethan had. His father, Harold, spent most of his time building the Blackwood real estate empire, treating his son more like an heir than a child. After the guests finally departed and Victoria had passed out in one of the guest rooms, Ethan stood alone on his balcony. The night was quiet except for the sound of waves crashing against the shore. Below, on the beach, a simple family walked together, parents holding hands with a young child between them, all laughing as they dodged the incoming tide. They had nothing in terms of material wealth compared to him, yet their joy seemed so authentic, so complete. Something hollow ached in Ethan's chest. With all his billions, his exotic cars, his mansion, his model girlfriend, and his endless parties, he had never experienced that kind of genuine happiness. Not since his mother died. He turned away from the scene, unable to watch anymore. Tomorrow would be another day of meaningless meetings at Blackwood Enterprises where he held a director title but did no actual work, followed by lunch at an exclusive restaurant, perhaps some sailing or golf, and then another night of partying to numb the emptiness. Ethan Blackwood had everything money could buy, and absolutely nothing that mattered. Ethan was having lunch at the Pacific Club when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Blackwood? This is Mercy Hospital. Your father has had a heart attack." 30 minutes later, Ethan rushed through hospital corridors, his designer shoes squeaking on the polished floor. He barely recognized his father in the hospital bed. Harold Blackwood, always larger than life, now looked small and frail, connected to beeping machines. "Ethan," Harold's voice was weak but his eyes were sharp as ever. "We need to talk. Save your strength, Dad. We can talk when I have a brain tumor." Harold cut him off. Inoperable. 3 months, maybe less. Ethan felt the floor tilt beneath him. Their relationship was complicated, but Harold was his only parent. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan asked. "Because I was hoping I wouldn't need to use my final card." Harold pressed a button for the nurse. "Call Jonathan Winters. Tell him it's time." The next morning, Ethan sat in the wood-paneled office of Jonathan Winters, the Blackwood family attorney for 30 years. The old lawyer looked uncomfortable. "Your father has made changes to his will," Winters said, adjusting his glasses. "Rather substantial ones." Ethan leaned forward. "What kind of changes?" Winters opened a folder. "To inherit Blackwood Enterprises and your father's estate, you must marry a specific person and remain married for at least 1 year." Ethan laughed. "That's crazy. Who does he want me to marry? Some business partner's daughter?" "Not exactly." Winters slid a photograph across the desk. "This is Destiny Williams. She's 35 years old and works as a cleaning woman at Blackwood Tower." Ethan stared at the photo in shock. The woman was black, heavy-set, with a kind face but plain features. Everything about her was the opposite of what Ethan was used to. "This is a joke, right?" Ethan's voice rose. "He wants me to marry our janitor. Ms. Williams works for the cleaning service we contract. And no, it's not a joke." Winters looked grim. "You have 2 months to marry her. If you refuse, or if you don't remain married for the full year, every penny goes to the Richardson Group." "The Richardsons?" Ethan stood up. "Our biggest competitors. This is insane. Your father was very specific. The Richardsons are already circling, aware that Harold is ill. They'd love nothing more than to dismantle everything your father built." Ethan stormed out of the office and drove straight to the hospital. Harold was awake, looking pleased with himself. "Why her?" Ethan demanded. "Of all the women in the world, why some middle-aged cleaning lady?" Harold's smile was enigmatic. "Because she's exactly what you need. I need to be forced into a marriage with a stranger who looks nothing like the women I date. Who's old enough to be my older sister?" Ethan was nearly shouting. "You have 2 choices," Harold said calmly. "Accept my final wish, or watch everything I've worked for go to the Richardsons. I'll contest the will. This is coercion. You're welcome to try. Jonathan assures me it's legally binding." Ethan left the hospital furious. He called Victoria, needing someone to vent to. No answer. Strange. That evening, when he returned home, he found Victoria in their bedroom, packing her designer clothes. "What are you doing?" he asked. Victoria barely looked up. "It's all over the financial blogs, Ethan. Harold's illness, the company in jeopardy. I heard the Richardsons are already making offers to shareholders." "So you're leaving? Just like that?" Victoria shrugged, slipping off her engagement ring and placing it on the dresser. "I'm not built for poverty, babe. Call me when you fix this." As she walked out the door, his credit card company called. His cards had been frozen pending verification of financial status. That night, Ethan sat in his Porsche, the birthday gift he hadn't even driven yet, overlooking the Pacific from Mulholland Drive. Everything was falling apart. His girlfriend, his friends, his lifestyle. All contingent on money he'd never earned. What would you do if you were forced to marry someone who represents everything you've been taught to look down on? Share in the comments what city you're watching this incredible story from. Hit like so more people can reflect on what truly matters in life. There has to be a loophole. Ethan paced across the office of Bradley Thompson, one of Los Angeles's most expensive attorneys. People can't be forced to marry someone. This isn't the Middle Ages. Bradley, a silver-haired man with calculating eyes, closed the copy of Harold's will. I've reviewed it 3 times, Mr. Blackwood. Your father created an ironclad trust. The language is explicit: marry Destiny Williams for 1 year, or the Richardson Group gets everything. What about challenging his mental competence? He has a brain tumor. The will was updated and notarized 2 months ago, with multiple witnesses attesting to his sound mind. Bradley folded his hands. I'm sorry, but legally speaking, you have 2 options: marry this woman or lose your inheritance. Ethan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. This was the 4th lawyer who told him the same thing. He drove aimlessly through Beverly Hills, passing stores where just days ago, staff had fawned over him. Now his calls were going unanswered, invitations rescinded. Back at his mansion, Ethan found Chad Holloway, his supposed best friend since prep school, lounging by the pool. Finally, Ethan said. Someone who hasn't abandoned me. Chad looked up from his phone. Just checking if the pool's still heated. Figured they might have cut the utilities already. Very funny. I haven't lost everything yet. Yet being the keyword. Chad stood, gathering his things. Look, I can't be seen hanging with Newport's falling star. No hard feelings. As Chad walked toward the house, Ethan followed. What happened to 15 years of friendship? Was it friendship? Chad laughed. Or was it Ethan pays for everything and we enjoy the ride? Don't take it personally, man. It's just business. Through the open bedroom door, Ethan spotted a familiar pearl necklace on his sheets, Victoria's. It had been a gift for their anniversary. Why is Victoria's necklace here? Ethan asked. Chad froze momentarily. No idea. Maybe she forgot it when she moved out. Later that evening, after Chad left, Ethan called Victoria. The call went to voicemail, as expected. But then, he heard something from a notification. Victoria had accidentally posted a story on social media. In it, she was wearing the pearl necklace, posing in Chad's downtown apartment. So much for friendship, Ethan muttered. The next day, determined to maintain appearances, Ethan drove to Rodeo Drive. He selected a watch he didn't need, approaching the counter with his platinum card. The sales associate ran it twice before handing it back with an apologetic smile. I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood. It's been declined. Try this one, Ethan said, pulling out another card. Same result. The whispers started as he checked card after card. People were staring, some taking discreet photos. Ethan Blackwood, humiliated on Rodeo Drive, it would be all over social media within hours. He drove to Blackwood Tower, planning to demand access to his accounts. The security guard, who had greeted him respectfully for years, stopped him. I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood. Your access has been temporarily suspended. I'm Ethan Blackwood. This building has my name on it. Not for long, from what I hear, someone muttered as they passed. That night, Ethan drank himself into a stupor, surrounded by the trappings of wealth that suddenly felt like a prison. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications, news articles about Harold's condition, speculation about the Blackwood fortune, and worst of all, a viral photo of him leaving Rodeo Drive, captioned, "How the Mighty Fall." In desperation, he tried calling his father, but Harold had been moved to a private room. With restricted access. Ethan grabbed his car keys. He'd confront his father, force him to change the will. But after starting the Porsche, he realized he had nowhere to go. The hospital wouldn't let him in. His so-called friends had abandoned him. Even his girlfriend had moved on before his life had properly fallen apart. He drove recklessly through the coastal highways, rain beginning to fall, matching his dark mood. Without really planning it, he found himself pulling over at the Golden Gate Bridge. He got out of the car, walking to the railing. The water below looked dark and bottomless in the night. How quickly everything had fallen apart. One moment he was Ethan Blackwood, golden boy of Newport Beach, and the next he was nobody. Without his father's money, what was he? What skills did he have? What had he ever accomplished on his own? As he stared into the abyss, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. Ethan. It's Martha Sullivan. The old housekeeper's voice was tight with worry. Where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours. Why? Ethan asked flatly. Need to make sure the silver's accounted for before I'm officially cut off. Don't be ridiculous. I know where you are, your car's GPS is still active in the security system. Stay there. I'm coming to get you. How did you even know to look for me? Martha's voice softened. Because I've known you since you were born, Ethan. And you're more like your mother than you realize. She also went to that bridge when she felt trapped. The rain fell steadily as Martha's old sedan pulled up behind Ethan's Porsche. The elderly housekeeper stepped out, her gray hair quickly becoming soaked as she approached him at the bridge railing. Come away from there, Ethan, she said gently. This isn't the answer. What answer is there? Ethan's voice was hollow. Marry a stranger who's everything my father taught me to look down on, or lose everything I've ever known. Martha took his arm firmly. First, we're going to get dry. Then we're going to talk, really talk, for the first time in your life. 30 minutes later, they sat in a nearly empty all-night diner. Ethan wrapped his hands around a mug of coffee, still shivering slightly. Your mother came to that same spot on the bridge the week before she died, Martha said quietly. I found her there, just like I found you tonight. Ethan looked up, shocked. But Mom died in a car accident. Martha reached into her large handbag and pulled out a small, weathered USB drive. There's something you need to see. Something I've kept hidden for 17 years. What is that? Your mother's insurance policy. Martha's eyes were sad but determined. Elizabeth made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd keep this safe until you were old enough to understand, or until you were in danger. Danger from what? From becoming too much like your father. Martha connected the USB drive to her tablet. Your mother wasn't who you think she was, Ethan. She wasn't born into wealth like Harold told you. She was Harold's secretary when they met, a simple girl from a working-class family in Oakland. The screen filled with photographs, a young, beautiful Elizabeth in modest clothes, with a warm smile. Nothing like the society portrait that hung in the Blackwood mansion. Harold's family opposed the marriage, but he was obsessed with her. After they married, he tried to remake her into his idea of a proper Blackwood wife. But Elizabeth never forgot where she came from. Martha swiped to another folder labeled Evidence. Inside were hundreds of documents, property records, emails, financial statements. Your mother discovered that Harold was using illegal tactics to force people from their homes for his development projects. Bribing officials, falsifying documents, intimidation. She was gathering evidence to confront him when she died. Ethan stared at the screen, unable to process what he was seeing. Are you saying my father had something to do with her death? Martha sighed. I don't know for certain. But her brake lines failed on a car your father had just had serviced. And she died the day after she told him she had evidence of his crimes. She opened a specific file, a list of families who had lost their homes to Blackwood developments. One name was highlighted, Williams, Gloria. Gloria Williams owned a small house on a prime piece of land Harold wanted for the Blackwood Mall. When she refused to sell, suddenly her property taxes tripled due to a clerical error. Her health problems were used to claim she couldn't maintain the property. She was forcibly removed from her home and suffered a fatal heart attack during the eviction. Martha pointed to a note in Elizabeth's handwriting, Gloria's granddaughter now alone. Find her. Help her. Destiny, Ethan whispered. Yes. Destiny Williams. Gloria raised her after her mother died. That eviction left Destiny homeless at 18. Martha's eyes were hard now. Your mother planned to use her Blackwood money to make things right for families like the Williams. But she died before she could help any of them. Ethan pushed the tablet away, his stomach churning. So what is this? My father's deathbed attack of conscience. Making me marry someone our family destroyed? I don't think it's conscience, Martha said. Harold doesn't work that way. But he does believe in control, even from the grave. Maybe he's punishing you for never living up to his expectations. Maybe he's punishing Destiny for being Gloria's granddaughter. Or maybe. Maybe what? Maybe there's something more he wants you to discover. Martha reached across the table and took Ethan's hand. Your mother saw goodness in people when no one else could. She saw it in Harold once. And I've always seen it in you, buried under all the Blackwood privilege and training. What am I supposed to do now? Ethan asked, feeling lost. Meet her. Talk to her. Find out who Destiny Williams really is, not who your father has led you to believe she is. Martha squeezed his hand. Your mother would want you to see people the way she did, not for their bank accounts or appearances, but for their hearts. Ethan stared out the rain-streaked window, his reflection distorted and unfamiliar. And if I still refuse? Then you'll lose everything, Martha said. Not just the money, but the chance to discover who you really are without your father's shadow looming over you. She stood to leave, placing the USB drive and a piece of paper in front of him. That's Destiny's address. Whatever you decide, remember that your mother believed you had the capacity to be a better man than your father ever was. As Martha walked away, Ethan looked down at the address. For the first time in his life, he felt something stir inside him beyond self-interest, curiosity about someone else's story. Ethan stood in front of his closet the next morning, staring at rows of designer clothes. Nothing seemed right for meeting Destiny Williams. After several attempts, he settled on the plainest items he owned, dark jeans and a simple blue button-down. No watch, no signet ring, nothing that screamed money. He left his Porsche parked and called a rideshare. The driver gave him a curious look as they pulled up to the modest apartment building in East Los Angeles. This was clearly not where Ethan Blackwood typically went. The neighborhood was clean but worn. Children played on a small patch of grass between buildings. An elderly man watered potted plants on a tiny balcony. These ordinary scenes of life fascinated Ethan, a world away from the artificial perfection of Newport Beach. As he approached Building C, his steps slowed. What would he say? Hello, my dying father is forcing me to marry you. Or maybe, sorry my family destroyed yours, want to be my wife. Before he could decide, a teenage girl with crutches emerged from the building. She struggled with a heavy backpack while trying to manage her crutches. Without thinking, Ethan stepped forward to help. I've got it, he said, reaching for the backpack. The girl jerked away. No thanks. I don't need help from strangers. Sorry, I just thought Jasmine. A woman's voice called from inside. Who are you talking to? The door opened wider, and there she was, Destiny Williams. In person, she looked different from her photo. She was still a heavy-set black woman, but there was a quiet dignity in her posture, and her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She wore simple scrubs, her hair pulled back neatly. When she saw Ethan, her expression shifted from concern to recognition to wariness in seconds. You're Harold Blackwood's son, she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded, suddenly speechless. Blackwood? The girl, Jasmine, looked between them. As in Blackwood Enterprises? The people who kicked us out. Jasmine, go to your room, Destiny said quietly. But now, please. Once Jasmine had reluctantly gone inside, Destiny stepped onto the narrow landing, closing the door partway behind her. I've been expecting someone from your family, she said. Though I figured it would be a lawyer, not you personally. You know who I am? Ethan asked, surprised. I clean the executive floors at Blackwood Tower 3 nights a week. Your face is on the company website, the annual reports, and half the magazines in your father's waiting room. Her tone was matter-of-fact. What do you want, Mr. Blackwood? Ethan, please. He took a deep breath. This is awkward, but has anyone told you about my father's condition for his will? Destiny's expression hardened. If you're referring to his ridiculous marriage demand, yes. A Mr. Winters called me yesterday. I told him what I'll tell you, I'm not interested. Wait, Ethan said, genuinely surprised. You're refusing. Did you expect me to jump at the chance to marry a stranger for money? Her voice was cool but controlled. I have my dignity, Mr. Blackwood. I just thought. Ethan trailed off, realizing how condescending his assumption had been. You thought because I'm poor, I'd do anything for a Blackwood paycheck? She shook her head. Your father already took enough from my family. Ethan's gaze drifted to a framed painting visible through the doorway, a small, neat house with a garden. Destiny followed his gaze. That was my grandmother's house before your father had it bulldozed for the Blackwood Mall. She died the day of the eviction. Her voice caught slightly. A heart attack, right there on the front lawn as they carried out her belongings. I'm sorry, Ethan said, meaning it. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. There was no accusation in her tone, just resignation. Why would you? Is that why you work at Blackwood Tower? To remind my father of what he did? A small, sad smile crossed her face. I work there because it pays better than other cleaning jobs, and Jasmine's medical bills don't pay themselves. What happened to her? During the eviction, she was just a baby. When the officers came, there was confusion. She was dropped. Destiny's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Spinal injury. She's had 7 surgeries. Ethan felt sick. This wasn't abstract business anymore, this was real human suffering caused by his family. I should go, he said, backing away. I'm sorry to have bothered you. Mr. Blackwood, Destiny called as he reached the stairs. I'm curious, what did you expect from this visit? Ethan paused. Honestly? I thought I'd propose some business arrangement. A marriage on paper, split the money, go our separate ways. And now? Now I don't know what to think. Destiny studied him for a long moment. For what it's worth, you're not what I expected either. You actually apologized. That's more than your father ever did. As Ethan walked away, he heard the apartment door open again. Why was that man here? Jasmine's voice drifted down to him. It's complicated, Destiny replied. Is it about the Blackwoods? Because I hate them. All of them. Ethan stopped, waiting for Destiny's response. Hate weighs you down, Jasmine, she said gently. And people aren't always what they seem. Walking back to the main street, Ethan felt something he'd rarely experienced before, shame. Not the temporary embarrassment of a social faux pas, but deep, gnawing shame about who he was and what his family had done. And beneath that shame, a strange new feeling was taking root, a desire to understand someone else's life, someone utterly different from himself. The next morning, Ethan used his emergency key to enter Blackwood Tower before regular business hours. Without his usual entourage or designer suit, the security guard barely recognized him. I need access to the archives, Ethan said. Sir, your access has been restricted, I know. Call Martha Sullivan. She'll confirm I have permission. 20 minutes later, Ethan was alone in the records room, surrounded by decades of Blackwood Enterprises history. He searched methodically, pulling files on every development project from the period when Gloria Williams lost her home. What he found sickened him. The Blackwood Mall development wasn't an isolated incident. Dozens of families had been displaced through questionable tactics, sudden tax reassessments, building code violations that appeared overnight, and health department citations based on anonymous tips. One document made his blood run cold, a memo from Harold to his legal team about the Williams property: find whatever it takes. That location is non-negotiable. Attached was an ownership deed that clearly showed Gloria Williams as the legal owner of the property, with no liens or claims against it. Yet somehow, 6 weeks later, Blackwood Enterprises had taken possession. Ethan copied everything he could find, then slipped out of the building as employees began arriving for work. He needed to see the mall for himself. The Blackwood Mall stood gleaming in the morning sun, a monument to luxury shopping. Ethan had attended the grand opening as a teenager but had never thought about what stood there before. He approached an elderly security guard who looked like he'd been there since the beginning. "Excuse me, do you know what was here before the mall was built?" The guard looked surprised at the question. "Houses. Little neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but people loved it. Been here 30 years myself. Started when they were still clearing the land. Do you remember a house belonging to Gloria Williams?" The guard's expression changed. "The corner house with the rose garden. That was a sad business. Old lady had a heart attack right on her lawn when they came to evict her. I was working for the construction company then." He shook his head. "Never felt right about it. What happened to her granddaughter?" "Pretty young thing. Came back every day for weeks, just standing across the street, watching them tear it down. Security kept chasing her away." He studied Ethan's face. "Say, aren't you dash, thank you for your help," Ethan said quickly, walking away. That afternoon, Ethan drove to St. Jude Children's Hospital. He'd found Destiny's name on a volunteer schedule in her personnel file. According to the records, she spent every Saturday afternoon in the pediatric oncology ward. Wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, Ethan slipped into the hospital. He found the children's playroom and watched from outside as Destiny led an art therapy session. She was different here, smiling, animated, completely present with the children. One little girl with a colorful headscarf seemed particularly attached to her. "Are you looking for someone?" a nurse asked, startling him. "I'm thinking about volunteering," Ethan improvised. "That's wonderful. The art program always needs help. Destiny runs it almost single-handedly. She works here too. She used to be a nurse's aide here before she went back to school for nursing. Still volunteers every weekend. The kids adore her." The nurse looked at him curiously. "Have you met her?" Briefly, Ethan mumbled. As the nurse walked away, the little girl with the headscarf emerged from the playroom, looking pale and unsteady. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked automatically. The girl studied him with wise eyes that seemed too old for her small face. "You have sad eyes," she said. "Like mine. I'm Ethan. I'm Lily. I have leukemia." She said it matter-of-factly. "Why are your eyes sad?" Before Ethan could answer, Destiny appeared in the doorway. "Lily, honey, it's time for your dash," she stopped when she saw Ethan. "What are you doing here?" "You know him?" Lily asked. "We've met," Destiny said carefully. "Mr. Blackwood, can I speak with you privately?" In a quiet corner of the hallway, Destiny confronted him. "Are you following me now?" "I wanted to understand," Ethan said lamely. "Understand what?" "You. Why my father chose you specifically." Destiny's expression softened slightly. "And what have you learned, detective? That you're more than just a cleaning woman. That you care about these kids. That you lost everything because of my family, yet you're still." He struggled for the words, "still kind." Before Destiny could respond, a commotion erupted down the hall. Lily had collapsed. Medical staff rushed to her side as Destiny immediately went to help. Ethan retreated, watching as Destiny helped lift the tiny girl onto a gurney, her face professionally calm but her eyes filled with fear for the child. Later that evening, Ethan sat at an exclusive restaurant where he'd arranged to meet Chad and Victoria, claiming he wanted to clear the air. From his table, he could see them arrive together, laughing at some private joke. "Ethan. Good to see you," Chad said with false cheer. "Holding up okay with all the drama?" Victoria smiled thinly. "We were surprised to hear from you." "I bet," Ethan said. "I just wanted to ask one question. All those years we spent together, was any of it real? Any of it at all?" Chad and Victoria exchanged glances. "Define real," Chad said with a smirk. "It was real as long as you were rich," Victoria added bluntly. "That's how our world works, Ethan. You know that." Ethan stood up. "Thanks for your honesty. Enjoy dinner, it's already paid for." As he left, he heard Victoria call after him, "When are you going to marry the fat black cleaning lady? We all want to see that wedding." Laughter followed him out of the restaurant, but strangely, it didn't hurt as much as he expected. Their opinion suddenly mattered less than the image of Destiny comforting a sick child, or the quiet dignity with which she spoke of her grandmother's house. How many times in life do we need to look through the eyes of a child to see the truth? If this story is touching your heart, subscribe to the channel to not miss any moment of this transformation journey. What do you think Ethan will discover next? The next day, Ethan sat in his car outside Blackwood Tower, watching employees arrive for work. He spotted Miguel Rodriguez, his father's longtime driver, pulling into the executive parking garage. On impulse, Ethan followed him. "Miguel," he called out. "Got a minute?" Miguel turned, surprised. "Mr. Ethan. I heard you were restricted from the premises." "I am. That's why I need to talk to you somewhere else." 20 minutes later, they sat in a small coffee shop 3 blocks away. Miguel stirred his coffee nervously. "I could lose my job for speaking with you, Mr. Ethan." "I think you were more than just my father's driver," Ethan said. "I found notes in my mother's files. She trusted you." Miguel's expression changed. "Your mother was a good woman. The best person in that whole company. You helped her gather information, didn't you? About the developments, the evictions." Miguel nodded slowly. "She wanted to make things right. She said no fortune was worth building on other people's suffering." "Tell me about her. The real her, not my father's version." "She came from nothing. Worked as a secretary to put herself through school. Smart as a whip, but kind too." Miguel smiled at the memory. "When your father met her, he was obsessed. Had to have her. But once he had her, he wanted to change everything about her, her clothes, her accent, her friends." "Did she ever mention Destiny Williams or her grandmother?" Miguel tensed. "Why do you ask about her specifically?" "My father's will. He's forcing me to marry her or lose everything." "Dios mío." Miguel crossed himself. "So he's finally doing it." "Doing what?" Miguel leaned forward. "Your mother made him promise something before she died. I never knew exactly what, but it involved the Williams family. She was devastated about what happened to them." Ethan thought for a moment. "Miguel, would you be willing to help me like you helped my mother?" "To do what, exactly?" "To understand the truth. About my father, about Destiny, about all of it." Miguel studied him. "You're different than you were before. Something's changed." "Everything's changed," Ethan admitted. The following Saturday, Ethan returned to St. Jude Hospital, this time openly. He approached the volunteer coordinator with his real name and asked how he could help with the children's art program. "We'd love to have you, Mr. Blackwood," the coordinator said, eyebrows raised at having a Blackwood volunteer. But I should warn you, Destiny Williams runs that program, and I understand there's some history between your families. That's why I'm here, Ethan said simply. When Ethan walked into the art room wearing a volunteer smock, Destiny nearly dropped the supplies she was holding. Before you kick me out, he said quickly, I'm here to help. Actually help. No hidden agenda. I find that hard to believe, she replied. Mr. Ethan. Lily called from her table. You came back. The little girl's face lit up. Are you going to make art with us? Destiny's expression softened at Lily's excitement. Fine. You can stay. But follow my lead and don't upset the children. For the next 3 hours, Ethan sat with kids fighting cancer, helping them paint and draw. He was awkward at first, but soon found himself genuinely enjoying their company. They didn't care about his name or his money, they just wanted his attention and encouragement. When Lily grew tired, Ethan read to her while Destiny worked with other children. He chose The Velveteen Rabbit, and as he read about the toy becoming real through being loved, he felt Lily watching him intently. That's happening to you, she said when he finished. What is? You're becoming real. I can tell. She patted his hand with her small one. Destiny says people can change if they really want to. Across the room, Destiny watched their interaction with an unreadable expression. At the end of the session, as they cleaned up together, Destiny finally spoke directly to him. Why are you really here, Ethan? I want to understand your world, he answered honestly. And maybe find out who I am outside of the Blackwood name. By volunteering once? That's not how it works. Then I'll come every week, he said. If you'll let me. She studied him, skeptical but not dismissive. These kids don't need disappointment. If you start this, you need to be reliable. I will be. As they walked to the parking lot, Destiny asked, have you visited your father lately? No. I'm still too angry with him. He doesn't have much time left, she said. Whatever he's done, whatever game he's playing with this whole situation, he's still your father. Why do you care if I reconcile with him? He destroyed your family. Destiny looked at him. Thoughtfully. Because holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. My grandmother taught me that. Your grandmother sounds like she was very wise. She was. Destiny hesitated, then added, if you really want to understand, come to the community dinner tomorrow at East LA Community Center. 7 o'clock. It's where I go when I'm not working or here. As Ethan walked to his car, his phone buzzed with a text from Miguel, found something important in your mother's old things. Meet tomorrow. Can't tomorrow, Ethan texted back. Community dinner in East LA. Miguel's response was immediate, I'll pick you up at 6:30. There's something you should see before you go there. Later that night, Ethan sat in his empty mansion, scrolling through photos he'd taken of the children's artwork. One drawing caught his eye. Lily had painted a portrait of him. Unlike the polished, perfect images he was used to seeing of himself, this one showed him with kind eyes and a real smile. For the first time in as long as he could remember, Ethan felt a sense of purpose. Not the purpose his father had drilled into him, to protect and expand the Blackwood Empire, but something simpler and more authentic, to be worthy of the way Lily saw him. Your father's condition is deteriorating rapidly, Dr. Bennett informed Ethan over the phone. He's asking for you. I suggest you don't wait too long. Ethan hung up, conflicted. Part of him wanted to ignore his father's request, but Destiny's words about reconciliation kept echoing in his mind. Before he could decide, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, we need to talk. About your father's will. Meet me at the Beverly Hills Hotel, room 214. The Victoria. What could she possibly want now? Curiosity got the better of him. At the hotel, Victoria opened the door wearing a dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Ethan, darling, she purred. You look different. What do you want, Victoria? Just a chat. She gestured to the opulent suite. Richard has been so generous with his accommodations. Richard? As in Richard Richardson? Ethan felt a chill. Oh yes. Victoria smiled. He's been very interested in your situation. A door opened, and Richard Richardson himself emerged from the bedroom, a tumbler of scotch in hand. At 45, he was impeccably dressed, with cold eyes that assessed Ethan like a business acquisition. Young Blackwood, Richardson said smoothly. I've been wanting to meet you properly. What is this? Ethan demanded. A business proposition, Richardson replied. Your father's little marriage scheme is quite the talk of the industry. Entertaining, but ultimately bad for business. Markets hate uncertainty. Get to the point. We know you've been spending time with the Williams woman. We also know the deadline for your marriage is approaching. Richardson settled into an armchair. What if there was a way for you to appear to comply with your father's wishes, but without the inconvenience of actually marrying beneath your station? I'm listening, Ethan said cautiously. We have associates who can create a perfectly legitimate-looking marriage certificate. Your father gets his wish on paper, you get your inheritance, and when the old man finally passes, you can discover the fraud and annul the whole thing. Richardson smiled. No need to actually tie yourself to someone so obviously unsuitable. And what do you get out of this? A partnership. Once you control Blackwood Enterprises, we merge. Richardson Blackwood has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Victoria sidled up to Ethan. And we could pick up where we left off, babe. You know we were good together. Ethan stepped back, disgusted. You want me to commit fraud, betray my father's last wishes, and then go into business with you? It's the practical solution, Richardson said dismissively. Don't tell me you've actually developed feelings for this cleaning woman. Her name is Destiny, Ethan said coldly. And this meeting is over. Richardson's pleasant facade dropped. Think carefully, Ethan. Victoria has been kind enough to share some interesting text messages between you two, messages that show you referring to this marriage as a business transaction, mocking Ms. Williams' appearance. If those were to become public. Those were private conversations, Ethan protested. Were they? Victoria smirked. Or did I edit them a bit? Either way, they'd be devastating if leaked to the press. Imagine how your new friend Destiny would feel. Ethan left the hotel shaken. They were playing a dangerous game, and he was running out of time. His father's clock was ticking down, and he still hadn't decided what to do about the marriage ultimatum. Miguel picked him up as promised that evening, driving him first to a storage facility where he'd kept a box of Elizabeth's personal items. Your mother wrote this the week before she died, Miguel said, handing Ethan a sealed envelope. She made me promise to give it to you if you ever started asking questions about the Williams family. Inside was a handwritten letter in elegant script. My darling Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've discovered the truth about Gloria Williams. What your father did to her family was unforgivable, and I failed to stop it. But there's more to the story than you know. Destiny is not just another victim of your father's business practices. Her connection to our family goes deeper. I promised to protect her, and I've failed. Please, if you can, make this right where I could not. With all my love, Mom, what does she mean about Destiny's connection to our family? Ethan asked, confused. I don't know, Miguel admitted. Your mother kept some secrets even from me. At the community center, Ethan was surprised by the warm, lively atmosphere. People from all walks of life shared food and conversation. Destiny wore a simple dress instead of her work clothes or scrubs, and she looked beautiful in a way Ethan hadn't noticed before. You actually came, she said, clearly surprised. I said I would. Ethan felt awkward among so many strangers, but Destiny introduced him simply as a new friend, with no mention of his last name. As the evening progressed, Ethan was struck by the genuine connections between people who had so little materially but seemed so rich in other ways. Jasmine was there too, watching him suspiciously from across the room. Later, as Destiny was serving food to elderly residents, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, "Last chance. Deal with us, or tomorrow everyone sees what you really think about your future bride." Attached was a screenshot of messages supposedly from Ethan, mocking Destiny's weight and appearance, calling her his ticket to the billions. "Is everything okay?" Destiny asked, noticing his expression. "I need to tell you something," Ethan said urgently. Victoria and Richardson are planning to dash. He was interrupted by Jasmine, who approached with her phone held out accusingly. "Is this true?" she demanded. The same messages were already circulating on social media. Destiny took the phone, her expression hardening as she read. "I think you should leave," she said quietly. "Destiny, those aren't real. I never wrote those things. Just go, Ethan. Please." As he left the community center, Ethan saw a photographer across the street, capturing his humiliation. The trap had been sprung, and he had walked right into it. His phone rang. "Dr. Bennett again. Mr. Blackwood, your father has taken a turn for the worse. You should come now if you want to say goodbye." Torn between rushing to his father's bedside and trying to explain to Destiny, Ethan stood frozen, watching his carefully constructed new life crumbling around him just as his old one had. Ethan chose his father. Racing through the hospital corridors, he found Harold Blackwood connected to even more machines than before, his breathing labored and skin ashen. Dr. Bennett stood nearby, checking monitors. "He's been slipping in and out of consciousness," the doctor said quietly. "But he's been asking for you." Ethan approached the bed hesitantly. His father's eyes fluttered open, recognition slowly dawning. "Ethan," Harold whispered, his voice barely audible. "You came." "I'm here," Ethan said, surprised by the emotion tightening his throat. "Time's running out. For both of us." Harold gestured weakly for Ethan to come closer. "Destiny. Have you met her?" "Yes. And I know what you did to her family." "Not everything." Harold's breathing became more labored. "Not the whole truth." "Then tell me now. Why her? Of all the people you've hurt, why force me to marry her specifically?" Harold's eyes filled with an emotion Ethan had rarely seen there, regret. "Destiny isn't just another person I hurt in business. She's the living proof of my greatest regret." Before Harold could explain further, alarms blared as he suffered a seizure. Medical staff rushed in, pushing Ethan aside. Dr. Bennett worked frantically, eventually stabilizing Harold, but when the chaos subsided, he had slipped into a coma. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood," Dr. Bennett said. "His brain is showing minimal activity. We don't expect him to regain consciousness." Frustrated and confused, Ethan left the hospital. His phone was filled with missed calls from Miguel and text messages from Martha. And a voicemail from Winters. "The deadline is approaching, Mr. Blackwood. The Richardsons are already positioning themselves." At the mansion, Martha was waiting for him. "I saw those horrible messages they're saying you wrote," she said. "Victoria's work, I assume." "How do I fix this, Martha? Destiny won't even talk to me now." "First, we need to understand what your father was hiding." Martha led Ethan to Harold's study. "After your visit to the hospital, I decided it was time to look where we never have before." She knelt beside the antique desk and pressed a hidden latch. A small compartment opened in the wood paneling behind it, revealing a safe. "How did you know about this?" Ethan asked, astonished. "Your mother showed me once. In case of emergency," she said. Martha handed him a piece of paper. "Your mother's birth date. That's the combination." Inside the safe, they found a sealed box with Elizabeth's name on it. With shaking hands, Ethan opened it, revealing diaries, photos, and a thick envelope marked DNA test. DNA test? Ethan murmured, opening it. Inside was a laboratory report with Harold's name and Destiny's, with a probability of paternity listed at 99.8%. My God, Ethan whispered. Destiny is my half-sister. Martha gasped, taking the report from his hands. This can't be right. They spread the contents of the box across Harold's desk. Elizabeth's diaries told the story. Harold had had an affair with Grace Williams, Gloria's younger sister, years before meeting Elizabeth. When Grace became pregnant, Harold paid her to disappear, never acknowledging the child as his. After Grace died in childbirth, Gloria raised Destiny as her own granddaughter, never telling her the truth about her father. Elizabeth had discovered this secret shortly before her death, while investigating Harold's business practices. She'd been gathering evidence not just about the real estate dealings, but about Destiny's paternity. He wasn't trying to punish me or Destiny, Ethan realized. He was trying to force me to find this out. To make me acknowledge her as family. But marriage? Martha looked horrified. If she's your half-sister. He must not have thought this through, Ethan said. Or maybe he never expected me to actually go through with it. The final diary entry was dated the day before Elizabeth's death. I've told Harold I know everything. About the Williams family, about Destiny. He was furious, but I won't back down. Tomorrow I'm going to find Destiny and tell her the truth. She deserves to know her heritage, and to receive her rightful share of the Blackwood fortune. She never got the chance. The next day, her car crashed when the brakes failed. Ethan sat heavily in his father's chair, overwhelmed. What am I supposed to do with this? Destiny already hates me because of those fake messages. How can I tell her, by the way, the man who destroyed your family is actually your father, and I'm your brother? You need to tell her the truth, Martha said firmly. All of it. The truth could hurt her even more. Miguel called again, and this time Ethan answered. You need to come to the hospital right away, Miguel said urgently. Lily's been admitted. She's asking for you. At the hospital, Ethan found Lily in the ICU, her small body connected to machines. Destiny sat beside her, holding her hand. When she saw Ethan, her expression hardened. What are you doing here? She asked coldly. Miguel called me. He said Lily was asking for me. She had a severe reaction to her new treatment, Destiny explained, her professional demeanor barely masking her anger. She's been calling your name. As if on cue, Lily's eyes fluttered open. Mr. Ethan, she whispered. You came. Of course I did, he said, approaching the bed opposite Destiny. Don't be mad at him, Lily said to Destiny. He didn't write those mean things. Lily, you need to rest, Destiny said gently. No. The little girl was surprisingly firm. You two need to talk. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison, remember? That's what you always tell me. Despite everything, Destiny's lips quirked in a small smile. Using my own words against me. Wise beyond her years, Ethan said softly. Lily drifted back to sleep, but she'd created a moment of connection across the gulf between them. In that moment, Ethan knew he had to tell Destiny everything, about the DNA test, about her mother, about Elizabeth's discovery. She deserved the truth, no matter how painful. Destiny, he began, there's something important I need to tell you. About why my father chose you specifically. It's not what either of us thought. Not here, Destiny said, glancing at Lily's sleeping form. Let's talk in the waiting room. They sat in a quiet corner of the nearly empty room, the tension between them palpable. I didn't write those messages, Ethan began. Victoria and Richard Richardson fabricated them to drive us apart. Why would they do that? Because if I don't marry you before the deadline, the Richardson Group gets control of Blackwood Enterprises. Ethan took a deep breath. But there's something much bigger. I found his phone buzzed with a news alert. When he saw the headline, his blood ran cold. Blackwood heir in incestuous marriage plot. DNA test shows fiancé is half-sister. What is it? Destiny asked, noticing his expression. Before he could answer, her own phone chimed. She looked at the screen, her face draining of color. What is this? She whispered, showing him the same headline. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. That's what I was about to tell you. I found a DNA test in my father's safe. According to the results, you're his daughter. Destiny stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible. Your mother was Grace Williams, Gloria's younger sister. She had an affair with my father before he met my mother. My grandmother told me my mother died giving birth to me, Destiny said slowly. But she always said my father was a man named James who died in an accident. I think Gloria was trying to protect you from the truth. Destiny stood abruptly. This is insane. Harold Blackwood is not my father. This is just another manipulation. The hospital doors burst open as reporters flooded in, cameras flashing. Someone had tipped them off. Security tried to hold them back, but not before several got close enough to shout questions. Ms. Williams. Did you know you were Harold Blackwood's illegitimate daughter? Ethan. Were you aware you were being forced to marry your own half-sister? Hospital security escorted them to a private room while calling for police assistance. Destiny paced, her composure cracking. This is a nightmare, she said. The children at the hospital, my colleagues, everyone will see this. Ethan's phone rang, Jonathan Winters. The Richardsons are moving, the lawyer said without preamble. They're filing an injunction claiming the will's marriage condition is void because it would constitute an incestuous union. They're demanding immediate control of the company. Can they do that? They're trying. And the publicity is devastating Blackwood stock. It's down 20% already. After hanging up, Ethan turned to find Destiny staring at her phone in horror. They found Jasmine at school, she said. There are reporters outside her classroom. She's terrified. I'll send Miguel to get her. No, Destiny snapped. No more Blackwood involvement in our lives. This is exactly why my grandmother never told me the truth, if it even is the truth. I can prove it, Ethan said. I have Elizabeth's diaries, the original DNA test. I don't care. Destiny's voice rose. Do you understand what this means for me? Yesterday I was just a normal person. Today I'm a tabloid scandal. Harold Blackwood's secret black daughter. My privacy, my dignity, everything is gone. The hospital administrator knocked on the door. Ms. Williams, I'm sorry, but with all this publicity, it might be best if you take a leave of absence from volunteering. The children are being harassed by reporters. Destiny's face crumpled. The children need me. I'm sorry. It's for their protection. When they were alone again, Destiny turned to Ethan, tears streaming down her face. Everything I've worked for, everything I care about, ruined. Because of your family. Again. We can fix this, Ethan said desperately. I'll hold a press conference, explain everything. There's no fixing this, Destiny said. I want out of this nightmare. Tell your lawyers I'm formally rejecting any marriage proposal. I don't care about the money. But the deadline is your problem, not mine. As Destiny gathered her things to leave, Lily's doctor entered. Ms. Williams, Mr. Blackwood, Lily's condition has worsened. Her body is rejecting the treatment. What are her options? Ethan asked. There's an experimental treatment in Switzerland. But it's extremely expensive and not covered by insurance. How expensive? Ethan asked. $2 million, minimum. Plus transportation, accommodation during treatment. Destiny laughed bitterly. Of course. The one treatment that could save her costs more than I'll earn in 50 lifetimes. I'll pay for it, Ethan said immediately. With what money? Destiny challenged. You're about to lose everything, remember? Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Martha, turn on the news now. He grabbed the remote for the waiting room TV. Victoria Sanders was giving an interview outside the Beverly Hills Hotel, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. I just couldn't keep silent any longer, she was saying. Ethan confided in me about the DNA test weeks ago. He said he didn't care that she was his half-sister, he'd marry her for the money and figure out how to annul it later. It was all just a business transaction to him. The interview cut to Richard Richardson, looking appropriately grave. This is precisely why the courts must intervene. The Blackwood Empire cannot be handed over under such morally reprehensible conditions. Ethan turned off the TV, sickened. None of that is true. I only found out about the DNA test yesterday. Destiny was already walking toward the door. I don't know what to believe anymore. But I know I can't be part of this. Destiny. Wait, it's over, Ethan. Go back to your world, and let me salvage what I can of mine. As she walked away, Ethan's phone rang again. It was Dr. Bennett. Mr. Blackwood, your father has experienced complete brain failure. He's on life support, but there's no brain activity. As his next of kin, you need to make a decision about continuing care. Ethan sank into a chair, overwhelmed. His father dying, the company being stolen, Lily's life hanging in the balance, and Destiny walking away forever, everything was falling apart simultaneously. And he was completely alone. Ethan sat by his father's bedside, the steady beep of life support machines the only sound in the room. Harold Blackwood, once so powerful and intimidating, now lay helpless, kept alive only by machines. I need to know if you wanted this, Ethan whispered. Was this your plan all along? To force me to find out about Destiny, only to have everything explode in our faces? Martha entered quietly, carrying a second box she'd found hidden in Harold's home office. I think you need to see this before you make any decisions, she said. Inside were more documents, older paperwork, photographs, and another DNA test. This one dated just 6 months ago. I don't understand, Ethan said, examining the newer test. This shows Harold is definitely not Destiny's father. Martha sat beside him. Look at this. She handed him a faded photograph of a young man in a chauffeur's uniform standing beside Harold. His name was James Foster. He was your father's driver and personal assistant before Miguel. James. Ethan remembered what Destiny had said. Destiny's grandmother told her that her father was named James. According to these letters, James and Grace Williams were in love. But Harold was also interested in Grace. When she became pregnant, Harold assumed the child was his and paid her to disappear. James died in a car accident shortly after, an accident that Harold always suspected was not entirely accidental. So the first DNA test was wrong. Not wrong, Martha explained. Incomplete. Harold believed he was Destiny's father for years. It was only recently that he found evidence suggesting James might be the father, and ordered this second test. Ethan pieced it together. So my father's deathbed redemption was based on a mistake. He thought he was forcing me to recognize my half-sister, but she's not actually related to us at all. I think Harold was consumed by guilt, both for what happened to James and for how he treated Grace. When he received his terminal diagnosis, he decided to make things right the only way he knew how, by using his will to force an outcome. But why marriage? Why not just leave her money directly? Martha shrugged. Harold never did anything simply if he could make it complicated. Or maybe he thought you'd never accept her as family unless forced to. He didn't anticipate the scandal, or how it would hurt Destiny. Ethan's phone buzzed with another message from Winters, deadline tomorrow. Richardson's legal team in court right now. Decision expected by morning. In that moment, something changed in Ethan. A lifetime of allowing others to dictate his path, his father, his so-called friends, society's expectations, suddenly seemed absurd. I need to fix this, he said, standing up. Not my father's way. My way. What are you going to do? Martha asked. First, I'm going to let my father go. No more machines. It's what he would want. After signing the paperwork to remove life support, Ethan called a press conference. 2 hours later, he stood before a room full of reporters, cameras flashing. My name is Ethan Blackwood, he began. Many of you have been reporting on the scandal involving my family, Destiny Williams, and my father's will. Today, I'm here to tell you the truth. He laid out the full story, Harold's belief that Destiny was his daughter, the second DNA test proving she wasn't, Victoria and Richardson's conspiracy, and the damage done to an innocent woman who only wanted to live her life in peace. Destiny Williams is not my half-sister. She's not related to the Blackwood family by blood. But she has suffered greatly because of us, first through my father's business practices that left her family homeless, and now through this public humiliation. Ethan took a deep breath before continuing. Effective immediately, I am renouncing my claim to 75% of the Blackwood fortune and transferring it to a new foundation dedicated to compensating families harmed by Blackwood Enterprises' past unethical practices. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. The Elizabeth Blackwood Foundation, named after my mother, will focus on providing affordable housing and healthcare support, particularly for children with serious illnesses. The remaining 25% will sustain the company under new ethical management. A reporter shouted, "What about the marriage condition? The deadline is tomorrow. I'm withdrawing from that arrangement and releasing Ms. Williams from any obligation. She deserves her privacy and dignity." Another called out, "Won't this mean the Richardsons take control?" "Let them try," Ethan said with newfound confidence. The documentation I've provided to the courts shows their active conspiracy to manipulate the situation. I believe the judges will find their claims invalid. After the press conference, Ethan went directly to the Children's Hospital and arranged to fully fund Lily's experimental treatment in Switzerland. "I can't undo the damage my family has caused," he told the astonished hospital administrator. "But I can make sure this child gets the chance she deserves." That evening, as Harold Blackwood was taken off life support and peacefully passed away, Ethan sat alone in the mansion for the last time. He'd instructed his lawyers to transfer the property to the foundation, planning to move into a modest apartment. His phone rang. "Miguel. Senor Ethan, I saw your press conference. Your mother would be proud." "Thank you, Miguel. I need a favor. Can you take something to Destiny for me? She may not want to see anything from a Blackwood right now." "It's not from a Blackwood. It's from her father." Ethan had found letters from James Foster to Grace Williams, never sent, expressing his love and hopes for their child. Along with the letters, he included the second DNA test proving James was her biological father. "She deserves to know her real history," Ethan told Miguel. "Not the version my father created." An hour later, as Ethan was packing a small bag of personal belongings, his phone rang again. Unknown number. "Is it true?" Destiny's voice was barely audible. "The DNA test?" "Yes. You're not Harold's daughter. You never were." A long silence followed. "Thank you," she finally said, "for sending the letters. For telling the truth. I'm sorry for everything my family put you through. The foundation will make sure you receive compensation for your grandmother's property. It won't bring her back, but I saw what you did," Destiny interrupted. "Giving up your inheritance. Funding Lily's treatment. Why?" Ethan considered his answer carefully. "Because for the first time in my life, I'm making my own choices instead of following my father's script. And it feels right. 6 months passed. The media frenzy around the Blackwood scandal had finally died down, replaced by a different story, the remarkable transformation of Blackwood Enterprises. Ethan, now living in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in East Los Angeles, sat at his kitchen table reviewing quarterly reports. Under the oversight of the Elizabeth Blackwood Foundation, the company had shifted focus to affordable housing development and community investment. Surprisingly, this ethical approach hadn't tanked the business as many predicted. Instead, it created goodwill and attracted socially conscious investors. His doorbell rang. It was Miguel, now the foundation's community liaison. The final preparations for the ceremony are ready, Senor Ethan. Today marked the grand opening of the Gloria Williams Residences, affordable housing built on the exact spot where Destiny's grandmother's house once stood before being demolished for the Blackwood Mall. The mall itself had been converted into a community center with healthcare facilities, job training programs, and subsidized childcare. Has there been any word from Destiny? Ethan asked as they drove to the ceremony. Miguel shook his head. Not directly. Martha spoke with Jasmine last week. They're doing well in Switzerland. After the scandal, Destiny had taken Ethan's offer to accompany Lily to Switzerland for her experimental treatment. As Lily's primary caregiver from the hospital and the child's emotional support, Destiny was the natural choice. Jasmine had gone with them, enrolling in an international school while Destiny worked part-time at the treatment facility. The ceremony was well attended. Community members, former residents of the demolished neighborhood, media, and city officials. Ethan kept his speech brief, focusing on the residents who would benefit rather than his own journey. As he was cutting the ceremonial ribbon, a familiar voice called his name. Turning, he saw Lily running toward him, her once pale face now healthy and glowing, her hair grown back into tight curls. Lily. Ethan knelt to embrace her. You're back. And you look amazing. The doctors in Switzerland fixed me, she announced proudly. I'm in remission. Behind her stood Jasmine, taller than before, her crutches replaced by a sleek carbon fiber brace that allowed her to walk with barely a limp. And behind Jasmine was Destiny. The crowd parted as she approached Ethan. She looked different, more confident, with a quiet strength in her bearing. Congratulations, she said, gesturing to the new development. My grandmother would have approved. I didn't know you were back in the States, Ethan said. We arrived yesterday. Lily's doctors have cleared her to continue follow-up treatment here. Destiny glanced around at the crowd. I see you've been busy. After the ceremony, they walked together through the new community center, Lily running ahead with Jasmine following at her own pace. The foundation is doing good work, Destiny acknowledged. It's not often you see someone give up billions and actually seem happier for it. Ethan smiled. Turns out money was the thing holding me back, not lifting me up. Who knew? They stopped at a plaque featuring Gloria Williams' photograph and story. Thank you, Destiny said quietly, for honoring her memory like this. It was the right thing to do. An awkward silence fell between them until Destiny spoke again. I'm moving back. Taking a nursing position at St. Jude now that Lily's treatment can continue here. That's wonderful, Ethan said, genuinely pleased. They need someone like you there. And what about you? Still running the foundation? Among other things. I'm finishing my business degree, actually earning it this time. And I volunteer at the children's art program every Saturday. Destiny smiled. Full circle. As they exited the building, they found Lily and Jasmine sitting on a bench, deep in conversation with Martha. Did you ask him yet? Lily called out to Destiny. Ask me what? Ethan inquired. Destiny looked embarrassed. Lily thinks we should all have dinner together to celebrate her recovery. She's very persistent when she gets an idea in her head. I'd like that, Ethan said simply. 1 year to the day after Harold Blackwood's death, a small gathering took place at the community garden planted where the Blackwood mansion once stood. Ethan, Destiny, Lily, Jasmine, Martha, Miguel, and several children from the hospital celebrated the official opening of the Lily Hope Garden, a space dedicated to providing beauty and peace for families dealing with serious illness. "I have something for you," Ethan said, handing Destiny a document. "It's the deed to your grandmother's original property. The foundation is transferring ownership back to your family where it belongs." Destiny's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the paper. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. It's yours. It always should have been." As the children played in the garden, Destiny and Ethan sat on a bench overlooking the ocean. "Did you ever imagine a year ago that we'd end up here?" she asked. "When your father first made that ridiculous marriage demand?" "Not in my wildest dreams," Ethan admitted. "Back then, I couldn't see past my own privilege. And now? Now I see what really matters." Lily ran up to them, holding a drawing she'd made, a portrait of all of them together in the garden. "Look. It's our family." Destiny looked at Ethan, a question in her eyes. "Not by blood," Ethan said softly, "but maybe family all the same." Destiny smiled, taking his hand. "I think I'd like that." As the sun set over the Pacific, Ethan reflected on his journey. He had lost a fortune but gained a purpose. Lost his father but found himself. And most surprisingly, in the woman he was once forced to marry, he had found something he never expected, a true connection built on respect, shared values, and genuine care. "You know," Destiny said, watching Lily and Jasmine laughing together, "your mother would be proud of you." "I hope so," Ethan replied. "I'm trying to see the world the way she did, judging people by their character, not their bank accounts or appearances." "Well," Destiny said with a gentle squeeze of his hand, "from where I'm standing, you're doing a pretty good job. Thank you so much for following this story to its conclusion. If you enjoyed this journey of transformation and redemption, please like, comment, and share with someone who needs to hear this message. What was your favorite moment from Ethan and Destiny's story? Let us know in the comments below.